This program deals with the world food problem. While half the world lives in abundance, the other half survives in a state of chronic malnutrition. Today we will be looking at three facets of this phenomenon: the international situation of food distribution, the production of vegetable and animal proteins. Until 1950, most underdeveloped regions of the globe were self-sufficient in terms of agriculture. To a large degree, what upset this balance was what we refer to as urbanization. Thousands upon thousands of families left the countryside and moved into the big cities. In many cases, they found no housing, no habitation, no running water, no jobs, and naturally not enough food to feed everybody. In third world countries, the food problem has become critical, and yet their populations continue to grow. What's all the more shocking is that there is currently enough grains grown on Earth to provide every human being with 2 loaves of bread a day. And yet every day on our planet, thousands of human beings do not get enough to eat. The problem is critical, and it's hard to imagine it getting worse. Yet that seems to be precisely what is in store. By the year 2000, it is estimated that the population of the Earth will reach 6 billion people, 5 billion of whom will be undernourished. If drastic measures are not taken quickly, the famine plaguing less developed countries will only get worse. Those who do survive will suffer throughout their lifetime from a lack of food, which will seriously affect their physical and mental development. And by the year 2025, there will be 8 billion of us. Will our planet have sufficient arable land to feed all those mouths? The fragile balance between world population and arable land is a clear indication of the gravity of the problem. The world's population increases by 25 people every 10 seconds. And during the same amount of time, we lose almost a full hectare of fertile land to the desert. Today, we know that man accelerates and even causes the process of turning fertile land into desert. Pollution affects climates. The destruction of forests, which act as natural barriers, results in fertile land turning into barren wasteland. Every year there is less and less fertile land, and as a result, less protein is produced, both animal and plant proteins. Protein is important because it contains nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus. And these 3 elements are essential for our survival. Protein is also needed to rebuild human tissue. 20% of our body is made up of protein. It's in our skin, cartilage, muscles, even our bones. When we digest our food, organic substances called enzymes acting like tiny chemical knives cut the proteins into little pieces in which there are amino acids. Amino acids are essential for our survival.
there are 22 amino acids, 8 of which can only be obtained in the food we eat. These 8 amino acids, unlike the others, cannot be produced by our own bodies. And if just one of these 8 amino acids is lacking in our diet, growth may be impeded or the immune system weakened. While people living in the southern hemisphere suffer from lack of proper food, in the north, people ingest twice as many proteins as they need. This dietary imbalance cannot be redressed simply by shipping food. Poor countries will eventually have to meet their own needs so as to avoid political and economic dependency on the rich countries of the world.
Sending foodstuffs is only a partial solution, especially as humanitarian aid does not always take into account people's dietary habits. For example, powdered milk is regularly shipped throughout the world. However, when mixed with water that is not always clean, the milk becomes filled with bacteria. This has often occurred, and the people who drink contaminated milk end up completely dehydrated from chronic diarrhea. In fact, these people were all the more vulnerable because in their countries, milk has not been a source of food for thousands of years. We in North America have our own dietary habits. Our prime source of protein is meat, followed by eggs and dairy products. The average American eats 115 kilograms of meat a year, and half of that is beef. That's a lot of meat. In fact, twice the amount of protein the human body can absorb. One solution to the world food problem is precisely to make better use of plant protein.
At present, 2/3 of the world's population has only 1/3 of available protein, whether it be animal or plant protein. We must achieve an equitable balance of food worldwide. Some researchers have placed their hopes in plant protein. Their goal is to make plants more productive and increase their nutritional value. This is an enormous challenge. Animal protein is very costly to produce. It is obtained only once the animals have themselves transformed the plant protein they eat. Chickens have to consume 5 kilograms of plant protein in the form of grain or meal in order for us to obtain 1 kilogram of animal protein in the form of meat. For beef, the ratio is 20-1. But we can't refer to this as waste, because animal protein, also found in fish, eggs, or milk, are essential for a balanced diet. If you were to eat only plant protein, you'd end up with serious health problems. This is partly due to the fact that plant protein is twice as difficult to digest as animal protein. Moreover, the amino acids and iron contained in plant protein are not easily absorbed by the human system. Iron deficiency, for example, weakens the blood and can result in anemia. Plant protein is more difficult to digest than animal protein because plant protein is sphere-shaped, whereas animal proteins are more fibrous. The tighter structure of plant protein makes it less vulnerable to the substances whose job is to digest it, like gastric juices and enzymes. Researchers are currently looking for ways to make plant protein easier to digest. They use enzymes from cattle or pigs. These enzymes, like pepsin and trypsin, are identical to those found in the human body. plant protein is exposed to the enzymes which digest it the same way our stomach does. All this is carried out in vitro. Plant protein, pre-digested and concentrated, are bound to become as digestible as animal protein. But if plant protein is to be a substitute for animal protein, its nutritional value must at least match the least nourishing animal protein, casein. Casein is one of the many milk proteins, but this has not yet been achieved, at least not on an industrial scale. If man were able to get the same nutritional value from foods rich in plant protein, such as beans and soya, the savings in terms of protein on a world scale would be phenomenal. There are other technologies that could contribute to establishing a world food equilibrium. For example, research in genetic engineering is now focusing on raising plant productivity. Plants cannot grow without nitrogen. 80% of the atmosphere is made up of nitrogen, but plants cannot absorb nitrogen directly from the ambient air. Nitrate fertilizers are being used to stimulate plant growth. However, rhizobium, a soil bacteria, has the property of accumulating atmospheric nitrogen. This bacteria fixes naturally to the roots of leguminous plants, such as beans. It's what one might call a marriage of convenience. The plant's root nourishes the bacteria, and in exchange, the bacteria gives the plant some of its nitrogen. But not all plants have the genetic structure enabling them to attract rhizobium. Researchers are therefore attempting to create the marriage of convenience artificially. One way is to alter a plant's genetic makeup so that it will attract rhizobium. Conversely, other researchers are trying to modify the genetic structure of the bacteria so that it will cling to different types of plants, grains for instance. But these technologies are not yet used on an industrial scale. For the time being, less developed countries will have to ration plant protein production and keep arable land to feed people. In an attempt to reduce the cost of plant protein production, researchers have developed a method of recycling agricultural waste, wood, and even liquid manure into edible proteins for farm animals. To do this, a tropical mushroom was modified in a lab in such a way that it would destroy organic waste. The mushroom is placed in a fermenting machine along with the waste. It feeds on the waste and therefore multiplies. This process yields an agglomeration of microscopic mushrooms that look like flakes, powder, or even paste, edible for animals. Its protein value is as high as 40%. This transformation process is very fast and takes only from 1 to 3 days, depending on the kind of waste used. Some turn in very high rates of performance. 2 kilograms of wood waste produces 1 kilogram of mushrooms, and the mushrooms will last a full year at room temperature. The transfer of all these new production technologies may eventually contribute to making third world countries less dependent on others for food.
Giving animals protein made from waste. Now there's a brilliant idea. Besides, it's a lot easier to change the eating habits of animals than it is our own. People are not going to stop eating meat overnight. That's why researchers are not only working on plant protein, but are also attempting to improve the productivity of animals.
It is unlikely that plant protein will totally replace animal protein, Not in the immediate future, at least. More and more research institutes and private companies are therefore seriously working on improving the world production of animal protein. Geneticists and insemination experts are striving to obtain strains of animals that would be more productive and also more resistant to disease. One technique currently employed is called superovulation. It consists of increasing the fertility of animals with attractive genetic characteristics to obtain higher numbers of offspring likely to display the same genetic qualities. Superovulation is basically quite simple. A fertility hormone is injected into the animal, say a cow, with a high milk output. Normal ovulation in a cow will produce 1 or 2 ovules. The hormone injections will increase that number up to 10. The next step involves artificial insemination of the cow with sperm from a bull, who has also been selected for his genetic qualities. After a few days, the ovules are removed from the cow's uterus and implanted into the uteruses of other cows. These cows are like surrogate mothers and carry the fetuses to term. Thanks to superovulation, a good milking cow that would normally produce 5 to 10 calves in her lifetime can produce upwards of 100. Embryos can even be frozen for periods of several months so that banks of pre-selected animals can be set up. Other researchers are working on maximizing chicken production. Once a hen has laid her eggs and is preparing to sit on them, her biological cycle undergoes a radical change, even if the eggs are taken away and put into an incubator. She will hardly eat at all and stops laying eggs. During this period, the productivity of a hen house will fall by roughly 30%. Geneticists have isolated the hormone that produces the lethargic period in the chicken and are trying to control its effects. However, the process of removing sufficient quantities of hormone for experimentation is highly expensive. It must be extracted from 2,500 chickens just to get 1 single milligram. To obtain the required amount of hormones at a lower cost, geneticists have tried cloning. This procedure makes it possible to produce from one specific cell millions of identical cells. If hormones can be cloned, it follows that animals can be cloned as well. Scientists hope that cloning will enable them to produce entire colonies of farm animals from pre-selected animals known for their productivity and high immunity to disease. To clone an animal, nuclei are taken from cells in its body. All nuclei contain the genetic heredity of the animal. The nuclei are implanted in the ovules, whose own nuclei have been previously removed. The new ovules are then transplanted into the uterus of an animal of the same species. Animals reproduced through this method are genetically identical to the parent animal and are called cloned. Cloning is not the only method geneticists use. They are also experimenting with implanting growth and productivity genes into animals. However, for the most part, animals that have been produced by means of this type of genetic engineering suffer from health problems and have a tendency to develop cancer. Only very few of the tests can be considered truly successful. But if scientists ever were to create a new species of chicken or cow, could they assure us they were fit for human consumption? Genetics involves long-term laboratory testing, and scientists must advance cautiously. Genetic engineering is certainly very promising, but it is clear that it will be quite a few years before it can contribute to solving the world food problem.
While science may be succeeding in its attempts to increase animal and plant productivity, all its achievements will be in vain if the economic and political situations in some regions of the globe do not improve. Have you ever wondered how much it really costs to produce a 200-gram hamburger? Well, you'd have to figure out how much fodder was used to feed the cow, plus the rental value of the field the cow was raised on, plus the geneticist wages, plus the farmers. Well, that's already a small fortune.